Welcome back to the Purple Quarter podcast. And this one, I think we're going to end this year with one of my favorites, Abhinav Yajurvedi, who's in the house. Thank you so much, Abhinav, for making time on a Saturday and coming into our office and doing this for us.
Oh, thank you so much. It's my pleasure. Thank you.
So Abhinav, most people have heard of Abhinav from the time that he was with Myntra, before that with Amazon. So I'm going to take you down through your memory lane, Abhinav, right from the time that you joined Trilogy. And we were just chatting outside about, how the Trilogy entire thing worked out for you. And from there you went on to Amazon, and from Amazon to Myntra, Myntra to now Pharmeasy, right? A huge transformation even from a domain perspective, if I look at it that way, and even culture perspective, different kinds of companies.
Right.
So would you be able to articulate to us, one, on how the companies were to you from a tech perspective, and second, from a culture as well?
Sure. Yeah. So I think it's been a great journey so far. As you said, the journey actually started with Trilogy. Mm-hmm. I joined Trilogy right out of the campus, and it also happened by chance. I think I got lucky. I met someone who was already working at Trilogy, and we just got talking, and then one thing happened after the other, and I was with Trilogy. Trilogy at that time was one of the best places for any software engineer. Mm-hmm. The kind of mentors you got there, people who were double MS from MIT, Stanford. Of course, there were people from IITs and reputed colleges from India.
Sure.
Very driven, bright lot. Got to learn a lot of things at that time. The kind of products we were building, some of them are ahead of their times, I thought at least. Most of them were enterprise software, but they were built on core internet technologies. Internet, you remember that internet was still kind of taking shape in the country, particularly in India. That exposure to the technology stack actually genuinely helped, and mentorship from some of the people who were contributing to open source. Open source was also taking shape at that point in time. They were our mentors. So got to learn a lot. We managed to go very deep into the tech stack. People would just casually in your code reviews, they would just give you 10-15 comments just like that, right? And you would wonder how you could miss those things, right? So it was a lot of learning that happened during the Trilogy days. It was a small setup. We were at scale also. We were about 500 odd people, 500 engineers only. This is both the Austin as well as the Bangalore center combined.
Sure.
So it was a close-knit family. A lot of us are still in touch, and a lot of us actually have been to either some of the well-known organizations like Google, Amazon, Microsoft, or they have started their own, right? So it's a small network of people, but very well connected in organizations where they are key influencers as well. So naturally, the next step was to either look at Google or Amazon, because those were the only two practical options available to any Trilogy at that time.
Sure.
And Amazon happened first, as luck would have it. And again, it perhaps was one of the best periods in terms of accelerated learning. So Amazon is a great institution. While you might be looking at just one slice of the problem, but you have an opportunity to look at things end to end. There's a wide spectrum of problems that they're solving, the kind of technology stacks that you get exposed to, the kind of people that you get exposed to is just amazing. And culturally, I think the kind of stuff that Amazon has done, it's just amazing. It is an institution. You can identify an Amazonian irrespective of where you are. Let's say you happen to be in Europe, or you happen to be in US or in India. In India also, maybe you are in Bangalore, or Chennai, or
Sure.
Hyderabad. In a few minutes, I think you can identify an Amazonian. That's the kind of...
Tell us more. How would you actually spot an Amazonian in a crowd?
In a crowd, I'm not sure you'd be able to, but if you're having a one-on-one conversation, it's just the way they are conditioned. There are these 14 leadership principles that Amazon has, and they're so ingrained into the people at the lowest level, the people at the highest level, the conversations, regular conversations happen basis those leadership principles, and that's what changes the people, right? So in regular conversations also, non-official conversations also, you would see that a lot of Amazonians end up, leaning on the 14 leadership principles of Amazon, right? And that's just amazing how they've managed to do that, right? Country boundaries, city boundaries, cultural boundaries, language boundaries, these 14 leadership principles, they kind of bring everyone together irrespective of the boundaries that they're coming from, right? So that was a massive learning, both from a technology perspective as well as from a perspective of how you ingrain cultural or your own values into the people that you work with. And it's extremely important when you're trying to build an organization to have that level of uniformity in the thought process, in the behavior of the people that you're working with, because the common objectives are otherwise very difficult to achieve, right? So that was a short stint. I stayed there for a couple of years only, but it was a beautiful period of immense learning. But one thing was becoming very clear, that I had to kind of in order to bring some significant impact, I would have to move to US. At that time, Amazon India was still not launched, and most of the decision making would happen in Seattle, which is understandable. And so it was very, very clear, in order to bring significant impact, you'd have to eventually get closer to the headquarters, right? That was not something that I wanted personally. So in fact, quite reluctantly, I started having conversations with people at Myntra. I knew some of the folks at Myntra, and that's how I got connected with the leadership team. I met with almost all the leaders at that time. I met with Mukesh as well, and something clicked. And startups in India at that time were still they were not the thing at that time. They were just taking shape, and there were literally horror stories about how Indian startups were, or rather Indian-led startups were. Things obviously have changed a lot since then. Now it's a very vibrant setup that we have, the startup ecosystem in India. But at that time, there were obviously reservations. So I also had somewhere at the back of my mind some reservations. But after meeting with all the leadership team, I felt that they had a purpose. They were really thinking big, and I thought it's good to take a plunge. Sooner or later, I had to. So I just went ahead with the flow. And that was a different learning altogether. From 0 to 1, 1 to 10, it was that kind of a journey. I think from early 2012 until, I would say, mid 2014, it was more like a 0 to 1 journey. Then the Flipkart and Myntra merger happened. So after that, it was more like a 1 to 10 journey, so to speak. But in those 2.5, 3 years, we had to almost figure everything out ourselves, right? From changing technology stacks to bringing technology for scale. We were seeing very rapid scale up of the business, and the technology had to keep up with that, right? And we did not have a lot of people to fall back on. So it was a lot of discovery yourself. You would try one thing, you would fail at it, then you would immediately take corrective actions, go to the next one, and then you would find a pattern, right? And that is a very different kind of learning. That's not the kind of learning typically you would have at a place like Amazon, because a lot of these problems are solved for. Right? And that's the beauty of a startup, to be very honest, right? That's what gives you the high, because it's no longer theory. It's not just understanding of how by reading a blog you figure out how would you scale for, let's say, 10x or 5x or 50x, right? It was actually about figuring it out yourself and making it happen. So that was a really nice period of immense technical learning. Of course, we were getting exposed, all of us were getting exposed to how you scale a business, how you scale an organization. We were still a small setup until mid 2014. And then after that, it was a period of rapid scale of the organization, right? Where you had to bring structure within your organization. You had to bring a lot more constructs of making sure that people have right mechanism to talk to each other, exchange ideas, exchange platforms, right? So you solve one problem in one pocket, you needed to make sure that this is available to the others, and they are not reinventing the wheel, so to speak, right? So both culturally, technically, business wise as well, that period, that 1 to 10 journey, if I could put it that way, right, that was also something that helped a lot in getting a good understanding of not just the technology part of things, which was obviously there, but organizational complexities. How do you deal with good and bad situations of the business? Business doesn't run in a steady line, right? Yeah. So you have these ups and downs, and how you keep yourself motivated, how you keep your teams motivated, how you still keep sight of your end goals rather than just getting bogged down by the interim issues, right? So that was really a very, very nice period of learning again. And then as we got into 2018-19 time frame, late 18-19 time frame, basically that there was still a lot of learning. We were still solving a lot of hard problems. We still are, I believe, at Myntra. We are still solving a lot of hard problems. But what was happening was there was a lot of cushion available, right? You had a lot of people to help you out with things, and the thrill and that excitement of solving problems at the grassroots was kind of somewhat fading away. That's when I started contemplating about maybe going back to a setup where we can do that 0 to 1, 1 to 10 journey one more time.
Sure.
And that's when I met the co-founders of Pharmeasy. I had this thing, long time back in college itself, that maybe healthcare or education they're two domains which are really exciting, high impact. You obviously have to do a lot of things, but if you get things right, then the impact can be really, really high.
Sure.
So that was there somewhere at the back of my mind, and then I met with the founders, and they had a very, very similar thought process. It was just uncanny. It seemed that there was a script that was going on, but as it turns out, we just had similar thought process, and I think things just happened one after another, and I joined Pharmeasy last year. It's been an amazing journey, although a lot of things have happened in just 20 months. But it's been a very, very nice journey so far, both from, again, technology perspective as well as from culture perspective, team perspective. I think a lot of things have happened. So variety of organizations, but I think consistent theme was that if you can work with like-minded people, it's just amazing, right?
Sure.
Finding the right like-minded people is the key, and after that, I think everything else kind of falls in place automatically, is at least what I've come to realize.
Absolutely. So Abhinav, actually, if you were to look at the last two startups, right, the first two companies anyways were more US bound, if I may put it that way. Yeah. The last two companies, if we were to dissect a little from a tech perspective as well, and if you look at Myntra, it was more the luxury, the brand conscious statement that we wanted to put out in India.
Right.
And I think very beautifully done by Mukesh, and you guys did a terrific job from a tech standpoint as well. But supply chain was still something which is a gray area.
Right.
Now, if you move to a health tech domain as well, and most people don't know that it's larger than what it looks like. The problems are many, and it's highly regulated, right, from a pharmaceutical side. So again, supply chain seems like a gray area.
Right.
And you've seen this move from both Myntra as well as the health tech space that you are in.
Right.
So could you tell us from supply chain how that has actually evolved?
Sure.
And how technology has actually played a role.
Right.
That'll be useful for us.
Sure. So, as you said, right, I mean, the supply chain fundamentally is the backbone of any business, right?
Yeah.
Any business of goods exchange, be it fashion or pharma stuff, right? But the pharma supply chain particularly is a massive challenge, particularly in our country. If you were to really zoom into the supply chain, pharma supply chain particularly, right, you'd find that the supply chain is extremely fragmented. What I mean by that is it's a very traditional supply chain with very limited penetration of technology, very, very limited penetration of information technology. I mean, there is obviously technology for pharma, but from an information technology perspective, there is very little penetration. And it's an extremely fragmented supply chain in the sense that, think of it this way. There are anywhere between 7.5 to 8 lakh independent, distinct retailers of medicines in the country, registered retailers of medicine in the country, right?
Right.
And these guys are disconnected from each other. So what I mean by that is, if let's say there is XYZ Medicals, in your neighborhood, and there is, let's say, ABC Medical, both are 500 meter apart, let's say. They're just 500 meters apart.
Sure.
They are totally disconnected from each other in the sense that they do not have an idea of what is available at this guy and what is available at XYZ, for instance, right? And what it leads to is that as a patient, when I walk into a pharmacy to get my prescription filled, as in like buy my medicines, in our country, there is only 60% chance that you'll get all your medicines in one shot. And this is the country average, right? So if you were to really, so we are fortunate living in big cities that we have access to multiple pharmacies.
Right.
The moment you start going into tier 2, tier 3 cities, it becomes an even, acute problem that, there are limited pharmacies with limited space, and they can only keep so many medicines, right?
Correct.
There are around 300,000 stock keeping units, different medicines available in the country today, roughly. And a normal, even good pharmacy can only keep about anywhere between 5,000 to 10,000 SKUs in stock, right? So some 290,000 SKUs have to be procured from somewhere, right?
Got it.
And where is that somewhere? It's basically a distributor. So like there are 8 lakh retailers, there are anywhere between 80,000 to 1 lakh distributors in the country. Again, independent, isolated distributors with very less penetration of technology.
Oops.
Right? So now, when you walk into a pharmacy, I don't know if you've experienced it, a lot of people have. This is, sir, I don't have this medicine right now. I can deliver it to you tomorrow or day after or whenever, right? I can procure it. So the process behind the scenes, so this is what the retailer tells you, but what is happening behind the scenes is that this guy calls his distributors. Now, his distributors means that he's been working with some 2 or 3 or maybe 4 or 5 distributors over the last decade or 2 decades.
So they don't change them. They're these.
This is relationship based.
Okay.
Right? This is all relationship based.
Okay.
And now he calls this fellow, sir, I need medicines. And, the distributor basically says, yes, you will get these medicines by tomorrow or whatever, right? And now you have a different problem because even the distributor has very little idea of what all SKUs he has and in what quantities he has these medicines and so on. Right? So again, because of the lack of technology, the two people who are making a promise to the actual person in need, right? They are actually unaware of what's available in the market and what's available with them, right? And so it creates a massive access problem in this fragmented supply chain. So what we are trying to do at Pharmeasy and the bigger group that we are not only trying to solve for the problem of immediate access online, we are also solving these problems for the retailers and the distributors.
Interesting.
So we happen to have our biggest marketplace of retailers and distributors. So on one side you have the retailers and on the other side you have the distributors. Our technology kind of is embedded in these in both these entities, and we present a real-time view to both the retailers and the distributors of what's available in the market, what SLAs, as in what are the service level agreements on which you can get these medicines, what are the discounts available, what are the schemes available, if you've placed an order, where it is, if you have to make a payment, where it is stuck. If you want to make a payment, you can do that on the platform, and a lot of other things from logistics to warehousing to demand visibility to price visibility to discounts visibility. You have all of that available on one single platform, right? It's somewhat similar to what the likes of Uber and Amazon they are doing to us as consumers, right? I mean, 10 years ago, hailing a cab would be a nightmare, right? You have a flight to catch at 5 in the morning. And you are at the mercy of the
driver,
the taxi stand fellow, right? And you make a call and you almost and this has practically happened with me, so I can I can relate with it so much more that I have to literally beg, sir, I have a flight to catch at 5 in the morning. Please be there at 4.
Sure.
Right, and this was the challenge that Uber solved, right? All the information that you needed as a consumer to make a decision is right at your fingertip, from who the driver is he a good guy or a bad guy? The rating tells you that. The condition of the cab that you get to know. It's it's a I don't know a ambassador cab, or it's a new fancy car. You get all that information. You get the information about the route. You get the information about the cost. You get all that information right at your fingertips.
Sure.
And that just makes it very easy for you to make a decision. Same thing with the likes of Amazon, for instance, or Myntra or Flipkart, right? What they are doing is that they are making this information available to the consumer so that they can make the decision, in a seamless way. So they solve this problem of supply chain in a different domain. We are solving that problem in the domain, a disconnected domain of pharma, where the need is critical. This is a genuine need. This is not something that's optional, right?
Correct.
So getting it right and making these distinct pieces connected with technology is our vision using technology. So we want to make sure that every independent entity in this pharma ecosystem, the patient, the doctor, we haven't talked about the doctor, the retailer, the distributor, and the manufacturer, right? These are the 5 distinct entities involved in the pharma ecosystem: the patient, doctor, retailer, distributor, and the manufacturer.
Right.
And these are all today totally disconnected from each other. The doctor, for instance, prescribes the medicines to you, but the prescription is handwritten in most cases. And a handwritten prescription is not digital, right? So you cannot look at this prescription at a later point in time. You cannot take this prescription to a different doctor. So let's say I happen to be in Bangalore and my doctor has prescribed certain things to me. And for whatever reason, I have to go to Delhi or maybe, outside the country somewhere. Sure. That doctor, if I'm consulting one at that place, has to start from the beginning, from all my allergies to all the conditions that I may have had in the past to whatever else that might have happened in my history. This has to be really retold to this individual, right? Because it's a disconnected ecosystem. It's a non-digital, non-technology based or led disconnected ecosystem. So we are building capabilities to digitize the doctor practice as well.
Okay.
Right? So that the doctor gets the benefit of referencing things from the past and also extend those capabilities to the patient. So you also get access to your own prescriptions, your history, your symptoms, your diagnosis. All of that is available to you in this connected ecosystem.
Sure.
Where even the doctor is digitized. So doctor is digitized, the retailer is digitized, the distributor is digitized, and now the manufacturers are also directly reaching out to people in the ecosystem using the same connected ecosystem, right? So fundamentally, from an overall supply chain perspective, the basic problem is that you have 5 key entities, and these 5 key entities have largely been non-digital, and they have been disconnected from each other for all this time. And in an economy like ours, in a setup like ours, where there are 1.3 billion people, and there are only 1,000 doctors, 0.64 doctors per 1,000 individuals in our country. Right? In that kind of a setup, a totally disconnected ecosystem would mean a lot of inefficiency in the system. And that's what we are trying to solve by building technology that sits across all of these entities. And technology in general is able to talk to each other better compared to humans and processes, right? So it's a very simple, straightforward thing. Once you build it properly, then these pieces can talk to each other in their own languages. And the technology does the translation between them. And thereby gives you a very connected ecosystem where every stakeholder gets the visibility of every transaction they are making in the system.
Sure. So I like the way that you've actually given us the entire 360-degree view of the entire piece. So my question here is, distributors, you spoke about, that right now if they are using this technology, would they also look at how the warehouses would be, new age warehouses?
Right.
Would that change happen through you guys, or would they do it on their own? Is there going to be an alliance there?
Right.
How is that going to work?
So the good thing is that people are opening up to the positive effects of technology, right? And generally, there is a reluctance because the impact of information technology or software technology is not immediately understandable, right?
Correct.
It takes a period of time to understand why one needs to invest in technology to bring even efficiencies in the end, right? Distributors, retailers, doctors, they're all now opening up to the idea of adopting technology. So to your point about whether distributors are now willing to experiment and all of that, it was more of a struggle pre-COVID because pre-COVID it was business as usual, status quo, and people were just used to doing things in a way, right? And then suddenly COVID happened, unfortunately, and that led to a very different situation for everyone. From common man to common businesses, everybody was adversely impacted, and honestly, technology at that time came to everyone's rescue. Correct. And that's when a lot of distributors opened up to working with us on some of these constructs. And they actually got the benefit of it as well, right? They were up and running like 2 to 3 weeks after the lockdown happened because they were able to hook into the network again. Sure. And come back on their feet. So to the point of how warehousing etc. needs to happen, we are actually offering that to a lot of the distributors in our network, but it's going to be a journey, right? I mean, there are, as I said, there are 1 lakh of them in the ecosystem, right? So not everyone will be able to adopt technology immediately. So it's a long drawn process. People have been doing this for 30-40 years. It will take time for them to change that mindset. Well. And I think that's happening. If anything, however unfortunate this COVID situation is, it has at least helped people realize that without technology, healthcare ecosystem in India will continue to remain extremely fragmented. Correct. And every stakeholder is now, including the government, right? They are now opening up to the idea of a connected ecosystem. So Prime Minister Modi actually announced it on the Independence Day that the government is now building this national health stack, national health ID, to make sure that people get access to quality healthcare, and more importantly, that access to healthcare gets digitized completely, right? So you can refer to it at a later point in time because it's all digital, right? So I think not only the businesses and individuals involved in the healthcare ecosystem, but also the government is now appreciative of the fact that technology is perhaps the only way forward to make sure that we can scale healthcare in our country and make it accessible to everyone.
This is actually good news for a lot of people. It's not just for companies like yourself, but even I think for consumers it's a good thing, because if everything is going to be so easily accessible, I think it's good for all of us. That's how I look at the entire space picking up. Right. So, Abhinav, just going back to what you just said, so you spoke about how technology is actually touching all of this. So my question to you is, for example, if I'm a diabetic, right, and I need these insulin shots at a specific time, so I'm sure this data gets stored somewhere for a consumer, right, on your platform. Right. So like Amazon has this for groceries, right, where they go, when it replenishes, then they go back and store it back. Right. Do you have that on your platform already?
Yes. So these capabilities are there on the platform, right? And you can choose. So this is not something that's forced on you. Okay. It's let's say if you want the app to give you that assistance, the functionality is available to you for automatic restocking or dosage reminders and stuff like that. Those capabilities exist on the platform. But as I said, it is an optional construct.
Sure.
If you want so eventually what will happen is that we believe that we will become a healthcare partner for the end user, the patient, right, or it could be the patient or it could be the caregiver. May not necessarily be the patient, right? And we would basically want to take away that cognitive as well as general overload of keeping in mind, what all medicines at what points in time and stuff like that, right? So we will become your healthcare partner to kind of assist you in any and all of these aspects with regards to healthcare, right? So that's where we are headed. Today, these capabilities exist. As I said, they are optionally available to you to make use of. And a lot of customers actually make use of that, right? But it's, as I said, it's some time before people, get a complete idea of what all they can do with these applications and make their life relatively easier and focus on their regular stuff and not on their medications on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. So would it mean that we'll also be moving into a segment where, if I am the person who's using the app and like I'm still going to pick diabetic because I'm sure most of the audience listening to this would probably relate to it the most, right? The second piece associated with that would be my tests, right? The regular tests that happen. So would there be labs that you guys would also be looking at and insurance that goes along with it? Because, I have an elderly parent. So for me, insurance becomes the most important piece that I need to keep a tab of. And I have to put a reminder on my phone. So would that all be supported? Because you said consumer will get a support from your end, right?
See again, it's about that connected ecosystem, right? So once you start building these bridges, insurance also fundamentally works on the understanding of risks involved, right? So today, there is less penetration of formal insurance in the OPD sector. In IPD, as in for hospitalization, there is insurance available, health insurance available. But for OPD, there is no insurance available. And that's because this OPD space, outpatient space, general consultation space, is unstructured. So the information is not really available for one to assess whether they can take a bet on an individual. Insurance fundamentally works on hedging the bets and understanding the risks, right? Because the data, the information is completely unstructured today. You don't find too many people taking that bet, right? But if it's a connected ecosystem and you're able to put this structured information in place, then you can extend capabilities such as OPD insurance, where you don't have to worry about whether you are consulting a doctor which who's perhaps going to charge you 2,000 rupees or a doctor who's going to charge you 200 rupees. Or you're going to go for a diagnostics test in a lab which is internationally renowned, or a local lab. You are no longer worried about making those decisions, right? Because now it's all insured, and a company will try and make sure that you get assistance on all of these aspects, right? So these are the natural extensions, and they are these are constructs that we are building, we are experimenting with. And these are the natural extensions of what we are doing. So this is the beauty of a connected ecosystem. Because of a disconnected ecosystem, you can just continue to do things in a linear fashion. The moment you make it a connected ecosystem, the possibilities change. Like I just described, insurance is one of the things, right? Similarly, diagnostics labs, as you were talking about, right? There is a lot of diagnostics labs around us. But we do not know which one is good, which one is not so good.
Absolutely.
And there are errors also, crazy errors that end up happening in these labs because a lot of stuff happens manually, right? So we are going very deep in that area as well, trying to build integrated technology so that the probability of error goes down dramatically. Again, the same concept, right? A computer does not necessarily make a mistake unless you give it garbage. So it's garbage in, garbage out, right? So once you kind of go very deep from a technology perspective, you can actually be embedded in the diagnostics machines, right? And you collect data directly from there. It's not like someone is manually entering your data. A sample gets tested, the results are picked directly from the device itself, right? So that's the deep level of integration we are doing now, so that we make it less error prone, and thereby again open up possibilities of extending OPD insurance, extending capabilities on us being your healthcare partner. We can then guide you on things. We can perhaps give interventions, preemptive interventions, right? Before you get into a situation, because we are so closely associated with you, we can actually provide assistance to you in taking better decisions around your healthcare. So that is only possible when you have a very deeply connected ecosystem.
Right. All this is very exciting because when I actually am, while you're speaking about all of this, right, in my mind there's a visual going. So there's going to be so much of data, right, just about me, and I will have access to my own data.
Right.
Because right now, if I need to get my own data, I have to look at maybe 10 files and maybe look at a lab report.
Right.
So you're saying all of this will actually be in one specific place where even one can actually go ahead and look at.
Right.
And the second piece, which I really liked, and I think most people who are watching this podcast may have not touched upon it, but this OPD insurance is like something really brilliant. Yeah, I've not heard of this in the past. I think this is like going to be the catchphrase. I'm certain of it because maximum people, I think the walk-ins into a hospital is OPD, right?
Right.
And most of them, you can see they have a worry on the face which doctor to go to. And when you're saying that is insured, I don't have to think about it.
Right.
People will go to hospitals without any fear, whether they have the cash or not, right, at the end of the day.
Right.
No, but this is brilliant, Abhinav, what you guys are doing. I think fantastic out there.
Right.
Yeah, so technology, I didn't know. Yeah, I knew technology is a boon, but to this level, how it is impacting people's lives, I think it's brilliant, right, from a health perspective as well.
Right.
See, so many cool products and so many people who have come in here and we've spoken, but this one's a serious topic, right, at the end of the day.
Right.
We're talking about one's health.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm sure after COVID, and I'm not saying luckily, but it's important that even Indians have stood up and understood how important it is to take care of one's health.
Right.
If each one in everybody's house today, we're talking about immunity, we're speaking about what food to eat, you know, how to take care of ourselves. I think it's been quite a bit of a journey. The right time. I think this is the right time for you guys also to actually bring this more and more out in the open.
Right.
Yeah.
See, healthcare is an extremely underpenetrated construct in India. We are 1.3 billion people, right? But only about 3.5–4% of the GDP spend goes into healthcare. The per capita expense in India is about $77 US dollars, and in US that is 12,000.
Wow.
So you can see the difference, right?
It's huge.
So the advantage that we have though is that we are a young country. We are actually the youngest country in terms of the average age that we have, right? But that's also the problem, right? Because from here we are only going to get older. We are not going to get younger, right? And that's where in the next 10 to 15 years, the next decade or so, these problems need to be addressed. If they are not addressed, it will actually become a real nightmare in the next decade or so. Providing access to quality healthcare will become a massive challenge given the disparity that exists today, right? And that's what our hope and attempt is, right? We are trying to build these connected, as I said, these connected ecosystems here to make sure that irrespective of your background, you get access to quality healthcare, right? You might be sitting in Bangalore or you might be sitting in some remote town. From a quality of healthcare access perspective, or the access to quality healthcare perspective, you could potentially be the same, right? That disparity can be taken away only with technology. There is no other alternative, right? So I think that's what even the government has realized. So, like you said, access to my data, it is my data. Why do I not have access to my own data, my own history? That's what the government is also trying to address now, right? So the whole National Health Stack construct is about having this connected ecosystem where you as the owner of data, you decide what happens with this data, right? So you can choose to give access to a doctor saying that, I want my doctor to see my medicine history or prescriptions and so on and so forth. And then you can take that access away as well, right? So the good thing is that you have the technology available now so that you can at least hope to do these things, right? And I think that's what is getting accelerated because of COVID. COVID nobody wanted, but now that it is here, at least the only positive outcome I see from it is the fact that there is a realization that we need to build these connected ecosystems so that quality healthcare can be given to everyone, and it's not just available to a select few.
Right.
So that's what.
So this is highly passionate job that you guys are doing, because so this is real work. That's how I'm looking at it. Right. This is not about saying that it's not even Ubers of luxury. This is more to do with even the common man is going to get favorably impacted due to this space. That's how I'm looking at it. So if we need to look at it from another side, right? If I look at it from a data perspective, since you spoke about medicines and distributors and specific retailers as well, would this also help give information back to pharma companies saying what drugs need to be produced? Will that happen as well over a period of time, or do you think that's too early for us to actually?
So I think it's a little too early for that to happen. But see, the pharma company or any company for that matter, right? Even in fashion, for instance, all the companies, they try to do a market study. Although fashion is very, very open-ended, abstract, medicines are very concrete. It depends on what symptoms are prevalent, what diseases are prevalent, and basis that you make your bets. But any manufacturer has to get a good sense of the demand, right? So there's a demand side, there's a supply side. The supply cannot run blindly without having a knowledge of the demand, right? So there are primitive ways in which pharma companies get access to demand patterns, primitive ways. Mostly, traditional surveys and offline assessment of demand patterns, etc. With a connected ecosystem, as I said, everyone involved, the 5 entities that I talked about, right? All these 5 entities will get access to their relevant data. I mean, whatever data is more relevant to them. For a doctor, it could be, what are the prevalent symptoms in this area, etc. Right? For a pharma company, it could be an aggregated value of, what could be potentially in demand. But these are early days. I think this, as I said, is a natural progression. All of these entities will start getting access to their respective data requirements, but it's going to take another maybe couple of years, maybe 3 to 4 years for this to really start materializing properly.
Sure. No, I think it would be good for our country in the whole perspective. That's why I'm looking at it.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of this information. Now we'll move to a little softer topics.
Sure.
So if I would like to recall, you mentioned that you were part of the journey with Myntra when the Flipkart and Myntra merger happened.
Right.
You've been part of a merger again now with Pharmeasy as well.
Right.
So from a tech standpoint, how much does it really change, Abhinav?
Sure.
Because there are people have 2 different ways of doing it, and there's never a right or wrong, right, when it comes to technology.
Right.
So how does this entire process happen, and how long does it generally take for people to adapt?
Right. So there are cultural aspects to it. How do you build connect? See, 2 organizations are, like 2 countries, different countries, right? Different people, different ways of doing things, and so on and so forth, like you said, right? So there is a cultural connect that happens, and that takes time. And that happens in every organization whenever there is a merger acquisition kind of a situation, right? And then there is a technology part of it. So the technology part, the way I have seen it play out in the past is that you do this opportunistically. So like you said, there is no right solution, wrong solution. There is no one size fits all kind of a construct, right? So on a case by case basis, you take decisions. So for instance, in the Myntra Flipkart journey, Myntra Flipkart ran independently, and I believe still run independently. Not just from a technology perspective, but also from an organizational decision making perspective as well, right? In the Myntra Jabong construct, however, we had to take some calls around integrating supply chains and stuff like that. See, any commerce business generally runs on scale, right? So and e-commerce particularly is a because the fixed costs in e-commerce are massive, right? You have these massive warehouses, and you have logistics costs and stuff like that, right? So there the calls had to be made on a case by case basis, and basis those business decisions, technology impacts are figured out, right? And so you need to some of these things you can anticipate as well, right? So when you build your systems, you can think of building them in a multi-tenant fashion, so that if a similar use case comes at a later point in time, you can easily onboard it. It's never straightforward, but you can relatively easily then onboard a new use case that comes up. So some of the things you can anticipate, a few things you can't, and at that time you have to basically go back to the drawing board and start looking at what could be the potential solves for two different organizations, perhaps doing similar things, right?
Sure.
So it's on a case-by-case basis, but it does lead to a lot of challenges because your business is still running. Both the businesses are running, and you have to then figure out a way to kind of merge constructs. So it becomes a little bit of a challenge at that point in time. But from a time frame perspective, it takes anywhere between 6 months to a couple of years, depending on the complexity of the two organizations,
Sure.
the commonality between them, etc., depending on the maturity of the technology systems that have been built. At least that's what I've seen across these 6-7 mergers that I've seen, mergers and acquisitions that I've seen in the past, up close. Depending on the maturity, the culture, the use cases, different use cases that the organizations have solved, it takes anywhere between 6 months to 2 years to integrate people and products.
Right, right. So if we were to actually look at the current time, and see in terms of hiring as well. So during this time, 2020, loads of companies let go of people, and we had multiple people coming out of colleges did not find jobs.
Right.
So this question's primarily for that.
Right.
Yeah, in terms of how you've said there's been positive movement for Pharmeasy.
Right.
You guys are hiring. We're aware
Right.
of that.
Right.
And we were having a decent chat outside about how startup means that there would be these ups and downs. You mentioned that in this conversation as
Right.
well. So what is one thing you'd like to tell people out there? There are loads of people who are wary about coming and joining a startup.
Right.
I do that from my end of trying to tell them that, hey, this is going to be interesting.
Right.
But for someone like you who's moved from larger companies to startup,
Right.
I think it'll be more experience that will talk.
Right. So I think if there ever was a time to be in a startup, at least in Indian context, it is now, right? This is a really exciting time. The last decade has helped in establishing startups, technology startups. I'm particularly talking about technology startups. The last decade has definitely helped, the likes of Flipkart, Paytm, Ola, Oyo.
Yeah.
All of these organizations have really helped in getting people excited about startups. But startup, at the end of the day, is a startup, right? And there will be uncertainties involved. But the good thing is that in the startup ecosystem, you have exponential learning, unlike most established setups where you have a linear learning. What I mean by that is, your learning in a startup goes exponentially high the more time you spend in it. Whereas if you're in an established organization, you spend first year, let's say there is some curve. I don't know, what the curve would look like, but it's 1 year. If this is the learning, the next year the slope remains the same, right? You just go with the same slope. In a startup, when you're in the 0 to 1 journey, you have exponential learning, and after that 1 to 10 journey, when you are scaling up, when you do not have existential crisis anymore, when you're not just surviving, you are actually thriving. At that time, the learning is immense, right? So it's like a risk-reward construct, right? So you do live with some amount of uncertainty in a startup compared to an established organization. But if your stars are aligned and your team kind of goes through this 0 to 1, 1 to 10 journey, right? Then the learnings are of a different level. And when I'm talking about learnings, right, it's so you grow not just professionally and personally, you also grow financially, right? And that's the good part about a startup, right? You can really lead a very good life in an established organization. There is absolutely no doubt about it.
Sure.
But in terms of financial security, if you happen to be in a company, in a startup which goes through that journey, it gives you so much more financial security if you are in that journey. I mean, there are startups that go the other way as well. That's the risk part of it as well, right? But I think both at all levels, I think professionally, personally, financially, if you happen to be in an organization which sees this kind of a hockey stick journey curve, you almost always benefit. There's never a downside. even if, let's say, things don't work out, that learning is still something that will help you immensely, even in an established setup. For the people who are coming out of college right now, or people who are in the industry, if I could just share one advice, this is whatever I've understood, is that, take a bet, right? In a calculated risk, you should not just be going and joining any startup. You should do your homework, understand their domain. If things click for you, as I said, if you're able to find like-minded people, go join them and see that journey, enjoy that journey. The learning is just of a different level, is at least personally I would.
Sure. So generally when people come and join you, Abhinav, in your team,
right,
and for all those people who are listening to this podcast and would want to come and join you,
sure,
what is one thing that will excite them?
So I think, technology, information technology, software technology particularly, right, can be applied anywhere, in any walk of life, to be very honest, right? But where we are today at Pharmeasy and the associated organizations, the sister concerns that we are, right, I think the impact is immediately visible. What we do, the work that we do, I mean, of course, it's software technology. It has all the elements of any e-commerce setup. It has a scale, it has complexity, it has, consumer side of the world, it has business side of the world, it has, a doctor side of the world, all of those distinct problems you have, but that's okay. That's just the software part of it. But the impact of it is immediately visible, right? So if somebody is really interested in solving meaningful problems using their software understanding, technology understanding, I think it would be a great place for them to try their hands, right? But it's something that takes time. It's not, these problems. So healthcare, like the way it is right now, has been like this for at least 5-6 decades. It's not really changed a lot. It's the same concept, same constructs. Yes, there is some software here, some software there, but it's just the same way of, or rather, a slightly different way of doing the exact same things that were happening. So no significantly incremental things have happened in that domain, right? So it's a slow process, but the impact of it is massive. As I said, right, it's an extremely underpenetrated market. When we crack these problems, their impact is manifold. So that should, in my opinion, excite people who are really trying to, use their brilliance in software tech, in solving real problems that affect humans.
Right. This sounds like AWS, right? When they first came in, it did take them some time to get out there, but when they did, it's like the biggest thing ever.
Right. It's like the hockey stick.
Yeah. So it sounds like that. It sounds like that for people who probably watching this podcast. Right. So Abhinav, would there be any last words you'd like to give people who would want to come and join your team, or who would want to come and interview? How do they get in touch with you, or any information you'd like to pass on?
Yeah. So I mean, as I said, we are looking for like-minded people, people who really are passionate about the intersection of technology and human impact. We are obviously available on the usual forums on LinkedIn, and you can reach out to us on our websites as well. And as I said, like-minded people who are extremely passionate about solving these real hard problems for real people. People who perhaps are not generally visible to people in software, right? So that's the kind of impact you can bring. So please reach out to us through the usual channels, LinkedIn or the website, and we'd be very happy to have a conversation and take things forward.
Excellent. We'll actually put up these on when we put the podcast up, so that people know where to get in touch with you guys as well. Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being on this podcast. It was lovely having you. I think I'm thrilled to see what are the new things that are going to come up in the future. Sure.
Thank you so much, Rupa. It was a real pleasure, having this conversation with you. Thank you.